And in developing news from the Attorney General's office, an emergency stay application for the state's congressional map has been filed into the U.S. Supreme Court. This filing asks the United States Supreme Court to pause rulings from lower courts that would force Louisiana to draw a new map by June 3rd. This comes on the heels of the looming deadline for the state to implement a congressional map for the upcoming 2024 elections. The Attorney General and the governor have both said they believe the current map with 2 majority black districts is the will of the legislature and should be used in November. Devontae Lewis, who acts as the Public Service Commissioner for the 3rd District of Louisiana, says it's a fast-moving process with several different strategies and opinions from multiple people.
I think what we have to do at this moment is keep our eyes on the prize that a fair map is needed. And whatever the courts do, they ensure that all Louisianians are fairly represented and that this legal strategy and legal confusion does not end in another election of people not having their voices adequately represented in Washington, D.C.
Language in the filed application refers to the ongoing case as disruptive and absurd, saying in quotes, Louisiana's impossible situation in this redistricting cycle would be comical if it were not so serious. Attorney General Liz Murrill released a statement following the filing of the application, saying in part, 3 federal judges who never spent a day running an election have ignored uncontradicted testimony that we need a map by May 15th and once again turned Louisiana's congressional elections upside down. Lewis says that is nonsensical and accused the AG of using bombastic language. The Supreme Court has asked for both sides for written arguments by Monday. If the court does issue a pause on the ruling, Louisiana would then default back to the most previously passed map the legislature approved back in February.